Good conversation. Bigotry. Music. It's white noise. Shit. 20 years ago I trained to be the profession I am now, so yeah, so nursing. I like to come back and haunt my children. No, be at peace. Well, I'm 48 years old, very happily married with 2 wonderful daughters. I'm a social worker by trade. I enjoy being a social worker. I'm not happy with the profession itself, but I enjoy being a social worker. And I work in psych geriatrics, but also I'm the manager facilitator for Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse Trust here in Dunedin. Really enjoy that work as well. I have to confess it doesn't actually feel like work a lot of time working with the survivors, and I provide the peer support, either one-to-one or the group peer support. I think I'm a loving, caring person. When I was about early to mid-20s, I got some counselling because I'm a survivor myself, and I found it such an empowering process. But I didn't want to have a job where that type of work didn't really appeal to me. I wanted something you could describe it as a bit more hands-on, so I trained to be a social worker. And I guess I really like the idea of trying to get people in a position where they can do things for themselves. I guess the ethos I believe of social work is you're trying to do yourself out of a job. You get in there and get people set up so they're independent and they don't need you anymore. I think I'm quite empathetic. I think I'm quite strong in a quiet sort of a way. I don't think I'm that judgmental, but I mean, there are times you have to be judgmental, especially when people behave in an abusive way. I can get a bit grumpy when I'm tired. I think sometimes I think I can try and take on too much, sometimes to put too much pressure on myself. Maybe take things a bit too personally sometimes. Depends. If someone thinks something bad about me but for the wrong reasons, then I don't really give a damn. And I come across that a lot in my role as a social worker. But if someone's upset with me because something I've done and I deserve it, then I do care quite deeply about that. To be honest, I think I would have liked to live longer in Hamilton, closer to my friends up there. Been interviewed. Often I have to get involved in order to protect someone, and in order to do that I have to confront someone else, and they get really upset with me, but they get upset with me for the very wrong reasons. It's all to do with their own personal power trips, and some people just don't like someone standing up to them. The standards of a social worker is, essentially, it is that duty of care, do no harm. It's you work in partnership with people. You're not there to empower yourself as a social worker. You're there to empower the individual, help them to empower themselves. You work with people. When you do an assessment with someone, you negotiate with them how you view the assessment and always get their opinion. All interventions should be done in collaboration with the person, so they should know what you're doing every step of the way, and any changes that need to be done, you should get their consent first. Everything should be done with consent. I think first and foremost, a good husband, a good dad. Probably a good time to bring it up. I've sort of noticed that there is quite a gender bias in social services, so it's someone who's known, who's sort of stood up and has tried to do something about that imbalance. Carrying on supporting male survivors, and hopefully get our service more well known around Dunedin. And unfortunately there is a need for it, so it's a bit of a bittersweet thing. It's quite sweet getting the service up for men, but it's very bitter that you have to do it in the first place. In 5 years I'd quite like to be working for male survivors full time if possible, and would like to see the service pretty much covering Otago and Southland. 10-year goals. I guess now that we've got the national body together for the male survivors of sexual abuse trusts around the country, I guess the 10-year goal would be to have the 5 different trusts a lot more consolidated and have a really good national voice for male survivors. I hate to say it, but 20 years' time we'll be around about retirement age, but I'd quite like to carry on working in some form or another, even if it is only part-time. And I guess perhaps mentoring sort of other survivor programs and services. I guess in the last couple of years I've really become really aware of men's issues, and I guess I'm very committed to that. But I don't want to see men's issues sort of trumping over issues of other groups. It just seems to me that, here's a good example. I would take my oldest daughter to a medical appointment, and we're there and we're sitting in the waiting room of the service, and they had posters all over the walls, and they had posters of basically showing don't prejudice against people because of their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, being a woman, everything, but all the posters of men were either showing men as potential woman beaters or men as bad fathers, and they had pictures of every other group in a very positive light, but men they didn't. So what it showed to me is that this organisation was fighting every form of prejudice out there, because prejudice exists, we have to be honest, except the prejudice shown against men. And I was thinking, and I think that is quite indicative quite often of the culture where we are in, and I think especially with medical services and social services, I think that culture still exists. I think men as a demographic group are seen as sort of the undeserving victims, so anything that's sort of prejudiced against men is almost, I think, in the minds of many people, have been seen as fair game. And I think the last couple of years, and since I'm starting to challenge that, I've come up some really quite strong resistance, and probably the strongest form of resistance I've come up against is almost like a silent collusion of this prejudice against men as a demographic group, and I know that the people who would speak up against other forms of prejudice are suddenly very quiet when I raise issues of prejudice against men. And I think that has really reinforced my commitment to men's issues. But there's one area I worked at. Whenever there was a female patient who was difficult, they would personalise it and say she's this and she's that. But whenever a male patient was being difficult, they would genderise it. Like, he's a difficult man, a difficult man. Yeah, I guess working full time with male survivor issues. Never underestimate the power of denials. I guess things will get better and it will work out. I'm not a big fan of giving advice, because when you give advice, you're sort of assuming you know more about the situation than they do. You sort of come across as the all-knowing professional. I don't ever really give advice. What I'd probably do instead, depending on the situation, is maybe just, I suppose it's a form of giving advice, but maybe say, well, have you ever thought about this, or doing it that way, and start creating a dialogue rather than giving out and out advice saying, you know, you should do this and you should do this. I'd quite like to be a writer. Yeah. I think it was the author Ian Rankin said that writing is a process of learning what you already know. And I think it gives you really good. Yeah, it's fun, but it also gives you really good insight into yourself and probably into others. Yeah. I think just by believing that age is just a number. Yeah, and you just keep yourself active, whether it's physically, mentally, however you want to do it, just keep being active. What comes to mind was the Owen Glenn interview about the funding he put into research for family violence. And then he's talking about, he's given the old, the usual political line that people give, and talking about facts which are really just perspectives only. And I was getting a bit angry because it's the same stuff I've heard 100 times, and there's a whole different point of view and perspective which is basically backed up by scientific research, which has just been ignored. And I was sitting there and I was getting a bit angry and a bit frustrated, and I'm thinking, why do people do this? And then he said a comment about wanting to protect women and children, and then he said, I like to protect those that can't protect themselves. And I got really angry because my wife does self-defence. I said, well, if you think women are so weak, you come and try and fight with my wife. And then I sort of went, oh. So that's my aha moment, because I was thinking, why are people like that? And then I think a lot of it is there. Quite a few people still carry age-old prejudices about women being weak. Love and family. I used to smoke, but it can teach you how addictive things can be. Yes. And how difficult it can be to give things up sometimes. 10 years ago, I got really sick with chronic fatigue. Wow. I always had this strange rule that I always smoke as long as I stayed fit. Mints. I guess a decent meal, yeah. I guess as a learning experience, and if you do regret something, rather than letting the regret take over, own the regret and do whatever it was better the next time. Sometimes you just know that something is just so wrong, you just have to stand up. Biggest thing I've learnt is to get a job you enjoy doing. I think one of the worst things in life is to end up spending decades in a job you detest. I think if you enjoy what you do, it has huge effects on the rest of your life and makes your a healthier, happier person, which in turn makes your relationships in home life healthier and happier. I hope will be a loving husband and father, and yeah, someone who worked and advocated for male survivors. Never trying. To be honest, I think growing up, and I had undiagnosed depression and a really bad anxiety disorder, and to where I am now and being a strong, independent person and able to support others. I think my first job as a social worker in Hamilton, I think I grew a lot there. I think sometimes I do avoid confrontation when advocating for men's issues because the gender politics can be very difficult to manage. My own experience in talking about the survivors, I guess it's probably not really a secret, but I guess the main thing you need to do is, as bad as it is, go through the process of experiencing the pain of the trauma, and by experiencing the pain of the trauma you can work through it, and then work through the issues and the damage that the trauma has done, and by facing the trauma you don't become so afraid of the trauma, and you don't try and put up resistance to sort of natural emotional mental reactions that you have to your trauma, and by doing that it certainly helps. A lot of survivors I work with, often these men have been holding the trauma in for decades, for some of them, and when they finally release it, it is like a dam breaking and it all comes rushing out. And I know one survivor talks about he remembers the tastes and the smells like it was yesterday, but through working through it and through peer support and through therapeutic counselling, sitting with it. And all survivors at the start, often they take time off work because it becomes the whole essence, the whole being. But after they work through it, it's still part of them. But instead of being their whole body, it then becomes their right foot. So it's still part of them, but it doesn't control and dictate their lives. And even before they consciously dealt with it, it was still subconsciously controlling and dictating their lives to a big degree, really. Mm. Probably the last film that really inspired me was Forrest Gump. I think for two reasons: just a great story, and it seemed to encapsulate so many moments of modern American history in one film. And I think also that it showed that someone who would otherwise be viewed as being below average can actually achieve extraordinary things. As I said previously, because of the counselling I had in my early to mid-20s, and it's such an empowering and insightful experience, that I wanted a profession that sort of helped give people their own power to do things for themselves and their own independence. I didn't think it was too bad, to be honest. I think being a male actually helped, because there's not many male social workers. I'd probably open up a men's centre. Yeah, probably, with my wife's permission, we'll probably buy a new house and use this house as a men's refuge and a men's centre. My wife. form a coalition. So then you have different perspectives around the table. I guess the one I said earlier, never underestimate the power of denial. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm a creature of habit. Usually every day I wake up and have a coffee in the morning. I go to work. I tend to drive the same way. Well, I do because I take the kids to school, but I tend to, I have my favourite chair in the house. I think I always put my shoes on, left foot first, right foot. I have all sorts of little routines like that. Why does the toilet paper roll down the hill?
No idea.
To get to the bottom. I'm dying to say I've got a third nipple, but I don't. I don't think there's anything about me that at least one other person doesn't know, to be honest.